Before going about this step, you should check your angle of your pumpkin face and make sure that it's not pointing too far up or too far down from where you envisage. There's nothing worse than putting your shell on only to find that your pumpkin is staring at the ground or staring into space. So before you shell, check your face angle.
And about time, we're going to start adding some, like I said, add a shell. And to do this, I'm going to take my paper clay. I'm going to take my spatula that had a plastic handle and then it snapped, but it's still great for my purposes. And we're going to take this and add it to it. And then we're going to start to just use this spatula to get this stuff flat to the surface of the pumpkin. And start applying our shell. So here's kind of a close-up of what I'm getting. Just apply some clay, smack it down, and then smooth it out and around with your spatula. If you don't have a spatula, that's fine. Just tack it on and pat it out and give yourself a shell about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch thick. You can even go down to a 1/16 if you feel like it. This is just a shell to give us some rigidity before we start doing our big overarching pumpkin wrinkles and form. As you work on your shell, be careful of the bottom. You really don't need to clay around 5 or so inches around it in a circle, because eventually we're going to be removing the entire beach ball through this section. So you can almost give yourself a little window in that spot so you know there's no need to clay there. So I'm just going to give myself a little don't worry about it zone marker here, which is very rough, but that'll let me save some time and tell me that I don't need to clay. This thing just demonstrated my next point, which is the fact that as you do put your clay shell on here, it's going to become a little bit top heavy because obviously the shell material is heavier and more moist. So this thing is going to want to roll. I'm only going to go to a point where I get to a spot where I really just can't go any further. I'm either in too much danger of tipping, or I know that if I rest this on something, then it'll leave a mark. So like here, I'd get a bowl impression if I left it like that. So I'm just going to cover as much as I can. And then I'll set this thing aside to dry overnight. But at this point, just adding the shell. And actually, for that matter, this is probably going to be just about everything but the face. And the face is kind of a little bit harder to shell anyways because you're doing it inside of very set areas. So actually, this is a good stopping point for me. I've hit pretty much the entire back, sides. I've got a good half of this thing covered. I'm just going to set it on something where it's not going to roll over. And this is only your preliminary shell, so don't worry about it if this isn't perfectly smooth. I'm not taking any extra steps to smooth this. I'm not using any paste to smooth this. I'm just giving myself a little bit of clay on here to work with later and a little bit of extra insurance against mishaps, drops, or beach ball slow leak deflations. So there I am for right now. Gonna let this sit overnight and harden on up. All right, we are back with it. Our shell from the back section is all set and hardened in good shape. When we do our ridges on the top here, it'll be set to absorb some of the moisture from that relatively thick section. And today I'm just going to put the rest of the shell on and around the face. Because this is my first pumpkin video, the only tools I'm going to use are the equivalent of a butter knife, which I hope you can all agree, the equivalent of a pencil. It's just a piece of wood with a pencil pointed top and a pencil pointed back, and a screwdriver. So nothing fancy, no silicone tip tools, just stuff that you might have around the house. Butter knife, pencil, pen, whatever. And we're going to keep our time going. We're now at about 1.5 hours of actual hands-on working in here. And we're ticking away. Okay, so I'm going to take some paper clay. And all I'm trying to do on the face here is pretty much the same thing. I'm applying a shell, and I'm just going to take it right to the edge of my face. Ah, yes, the other fun tool of the spatula. I'm just going to outline my face and give myself a shell layer. And if any of my spots go a little bit too far or into my face, I'll take either my screwdriver or my butter knife and just back them up so that they're not covering my stuff, and maybe I'll give them a little smooth down, because let's face it, a butter knife will do the exact same job that the spatula will do in terms of smoothing. I'm not going to try to get this super smooth as I work, because there's entirely too much possibility that while I'm working over here on something, I knock it with the piece of my hands. So we're just going to try to get a shell that's going to cover everything but our cutout section of the face. If your current shell overlaps your old shell, no biggie. Do as you like. It doesn't really matter. It's all extra structure and extra strength. When I do the teeth, I like to kind of pre-shape myself a little triangle by pinching in from the bottom of my clay and having the top open. Gives me a inverted triangle shape, which I can then just lay right down onto whatever tooth section I've got. And that's got it pre-made for me, so then I just have to give it a little smoosh down and tighten up. Helps doing teeth a little bit faster. Okay, so I've got pretty much the entire thing all set and shelled. The only thing I'm going to do now is just make sure that my areas where this shell borders on the old one are smoothed down, first with finger, and then I'm just going to use a little bit of the old spatula here. And again, we're not looking for perfect smooth. We're just looking for no huge, nasty, terrible, god-awful wrinkles. Visiting cats, you know. Who like to donate their cat hair to the project. What do I mean by huge, nasty ones? Right here is what I consider to be a huge, nasty one. That is a really, really big wrinkle, and I'm just going to flatten it out with my fingertip there. No problems, and it's gone. So anything that was like that huge hole there is not what we want. The other thing we're going to look for at this point is grab our butter knife and just make sure that you're right up to the edge of the areas that you want. And you can use your butter knife to smooth if you want. But I'm going to make sure that the lines of my face that I drew in, and I'm just pushing the clay back until it meets where I want my face to be. And then I'll just give it a little smooth down. Like I said, we're not going for hyper smooth here. We just want any really big, nasty areas. Like right here, there's a spot where this nose bit of clay joins up with the top. It's a huge fold in there. I'm just going to give that a quick smooth down with my butter knife. Like right here, this tooth is a bit oblongishly shaped. I'm just going to give it a little push one side, get a little push on the other side. And that's a significantly sharper and more even tooth. All right, so there is our face shell. All set and good. And I'm just going to let this dry overnight. No problem. And then the next step we'll be getting on to is putting in our pumpkin ridges.